Welcome to episode 4 of the Beyond podcast, where we interview people who we find inspiring, who might inspire you too. Our special guest for today's episode is Neha. Neha just graduated from UC Berkeley in 2020, majoring in computer science and cognitive science. Currently, she works at Adobe as a software engineer. During college, she was the COO and Project Lead at Invention Corps, editor for the Berkeley Fiction Review, research assistant at Computational Cognitive Lab, and connector teaching assistant at UC Berkeley Institute of Data Science. Outside of college, she worked as a software engineering intern at Etsy and software engineering intern at CyberCube. Welcome, Neha. How are you doing?
Hey, Ethan. I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so just to preface this, Neha and I work together at Etsy, keeping
Yeah,
commerce human. Very exciting.
a
We're
New
both
York summer.
interns. Yeah, so fun in New York. And yeah, Neha gives really great advice. So I was really excited to have her on this podcast for this episode. So yeah, just to get us started, let's talk about your experiences before college and what led you to eventually pursue computer science and cognitive science.
Yeah,
So let's
sure.
start with what were some key experiences in high school that, you know, helped you a lot, during college and helped you succeed in college and beyond? Like, what were some of
Yeah.
those key experiences for you?
Yeah, so interestingly, even though once I got to college and, after college, I'm big, like I'm a software engineer, I'm thinking like really logically all
Hmm.
the time. My road to get there was not like the traditional, like I loved math and I loved all my CS
Mm.
courses. I was actually like my favorite class in high school was English, and my really big kind of extracurricular in high school was speech and debate. But I actually think that having that kind of alternative view on things, like being really humanities focused and really thinking about language and writing and enjoying like the softer skills really helped me when it came to applying for college. And ultimately,
Mm.
I can see those skills that I picked up during doing speech and debate or, creative writing in high school give me a really unique set of skills in the workplace, especially in
Hmm.
STEM, where I feel like I was able to be a little more balanced or at least just have like a really unique perspective when it comes to the work I'm doing. So in terms of important things I did in high school, the kind of defining pillar of my high school experience was definitely speech and debate. I did, so there's like a ton of events in speech and debate, and I did some debate, and my main one was called OPP, which is Original Prose and Poetry. And it just basically writing your own like 10-minute one woman play. And I would compete with that. Like
That's
every
so
Saturday,
cool.
I'd put my suit on and go to a tournament and just kind of like perform my heart out. And it was really fun.
Wow. That's super fun. So during that, did you do that all throughout high school? Like how did you even find out about speech and debate and what motivated you to, get involved in
Yeah,
that club in the first place?
that's a great question because I think about that sometimes where speech and debate ended up being such a like defining pivotal part of my high school career.
Hmm.
But the only reason I got into it was because in middle school, one of my friends was doing just like a week long speech and debate intensive in the high school. And she was like,
Hmm.
hey, do you want to do this too? We could be debate partners. And I was like, okay, why not? And really, it
Yeah.
was because of that one introduction and just surrounding yourself with the right people, I guess, that
Hmm.
everyone's kind of doing this one thing. I guess I should figure out what it's like too. And it really led me to something that I truly loved all 4 years. So I started out just freshman year. I took our intro speech and debate class, fell in love with competing, and then it was kind of my
Hmm.
life for the next 3 years.
That's super cool. And then what motivated you once you entered college to I guess it's like a little bit different, like computer science and cognitive science. Like what motivated you to go into those fields starting at Berkeley?
Yeah. So when I came into college, I really wasn't quite sure what I wanted to major in. I think a lot of the times when you're, especially I think a lot of Berkeley students might share this experience, you're very single mindedly focused on just getting into a good school, right? In high school,
Yeah.
it's I got to get the SATs, I got to
Hmm.
get the grades, I got to do the extracurriculars. And the only thing you're really thinking about is I want to get into a specific school, not thinking as much what I want to do when I get there. And sure, you like think about it a little bit to like write your essays and say yeah, like, oh, Berkeley's the right place for me because
Yeah.
like this program is so great. But I think it didn't feel real until you actually have you press that button on Cal Central saying that you're going, and then all of a sudden
Right.
it's like, oh, this felt like the biggest journey of my life to get here, but actually
Mhm.
the real journey is starting right now as I figure out what I'm going to do with my time now that I'm here. So I had an idea. I had taken computer science classes. I took my one APCS class in high school, and my dad's a computer engineer, so I kind of had that
Oh.
background.
Hmm.
So I knew that it was something like, I think that's something that really opens up your, just knowing people who have done things in the past opens
Hmm.
up what you know is possible.
Right.
And I think that's one of the reasons why something I'm so passionate about is encouraging like women in STEM, because all it takes is seeing people doing roles that you might envision yourself in, that kind of opens those doors for you. So for me, I
Hmm.
happen to have lived with a software engineer all my life, so I knew exactly what that entailed. And then
Right.
having the access to computer science education in my school allowed me to immediately, before I had to make any decisions about my major, actually take a
Mhm.
class and see if I liked it or not. So those factors kind of combined with my own personality, just knowing that I'm a really logical thinker and I
Right.
really like to build things. So I knew in the back of my mind, okay, computer science might be something that I'd be interested in. But at the same time, I knew that I'm not a math person. I do not enjoy these math classes that I'm taking. And it seemed like everything I was reading about computer science, everyone I was meeting who were computer science majors were like all about numbers, and like they were really excited about their engineering classes and like, you know, their calculus classes. And I just knew that I didn't quite fit in there either. So going into college, I was actually thinking about being a cognitive science major, which I am a cognitive science major, because a lot of those interests that I was talking about in high school, when I was really interested in language, I was interested in performing, I'm really interested in psychology. So a lot of my interest when it comes to computer science was viewing CS as a tool to figure out things that I was really interested by. So one of my big passions is natural language processing and understanding how a computer can, you know, start to bridge that gap between cognition and computation. So I came in as a cog sci major, and I was like, okay, maybe I'll minor as CS. I don't really know what this is about. I'm kind of too scared to broach it. So I was taking cog sci, but cog sci at Berkeley is it's kind of like a cousin major to CS. A lot of people will do one or the other, or minor in CS and have a cog sci
Mhm.
major. So I did that, and through my cog sci coursework, I had to take intro CS classes. So I took 61A, which is our first intro class at Berkeley. It was good. I had a good time. I got a good grade. I was like, okay, maybe I'm kind of
Yeah.
good at this. And then I took 61B, which is our data structures class.
Hmm.
And I had it with Hilfinger, who is a notorious
Oh.
professor for giving a lot of projects, having a lot of work, and being really hard.
Yeah.
But I really felt like in that class, I was flourishing under those specific
Mm.
circumstances. I loved working on the project. I'd be up all night working on the 61B projects, but I really enjoyed the way it was forcing my brain to think. And that's kind of what clued me into kind of forming a narrative of my own of, okay, this is what computer science is. Like, I know you've heard all of these things about what computer science majors are like and what those jobs are going to be like, but you are witnessing what the work would be like for yourself. And I really, really enjoyed it. So that's kind of what pushed me over the edge my sophomore year to tack on that double major, because I was like, this is good. I can do it.
Yeah.
I know that it might be hard, but if I'm finding something that I'm truly enjoying doing, then I got to keep seeing where this path leads.
Right. And yeah, I
Yeah.
think for me, like at Berkeley, the projects are what like pushed me over to ed to really fall in love with,
Hmm.
CS at Berkeley are the projects from like 61A and 61B. I think they're like super fun, and you can see like how like software engineering can be applied to like all these different types of applications. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah, it
super
really
cool. Yeah.
puts, I think, what you're learning in context, because I think
Right.
computer science could be like a really kind of like ambiguous,
Yeah.
immaterial subject at times. You're like, okay, I'm
Hmm.
like learning about recursion and like I can barely grasp the concept of recursion as it is. But then when you
Right.
connect it to a real problem that you want to solve, all of a sudden you're so much motivated to figure it out. All of a sudden efficiency means something to you. It's not just like
Right.
a number, you know, it's not a test question.
Yeah.
It's like, I want my program to run fast. Like it's gonna kill my computer if it like keeps doing the stupid loop I have it in. So that really like motivates you to understand what's important and how to think the right way.
Yeah, exactly. And then like when you get into like an internship, right? I think I learned a lot more like at Etsy, like when we're
Hmm.
working there, like even more like even more context was like real life. Like you're building things for like real people. I think
Hmm.
that's when it like finally clicked. You're like, wow, this is super cool. You can do a lot of amazing things with it.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just really a matter of experience. And that takes me back to why I just like think it's so important that everyone have access to education like that. Like
Mm,
Berkeley sets you up in such a great way to be able to have those projects in school, but then also allows you it opens those doors for things like internships where you can really see
right.
everything play out in person. Because I don't think I think it would have been a terrifying prospect if I had not had seen real life applications and then I just graduated and I was like, okay, theoretically this is a job that I think I will like, but now for the first time as I'm getting a full-time job, I'm going to figure it out. Like that would have
Yeah,
been
it's scary.
just you like luckily I like what I do, but if you don't, then all of a sudden you're
Right.
stuck with a degree and a job you don't like.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think like especially for me, like I'm graduating next semester and I always wonder
Congrats.
like, yeah, very
Yeah.
exciting.
You're graduating
Finally
early, right?
graduating a little bit early, yeah.
Oh.
Um but yeah, so I'm like working on this thing that I'm like really passionate about, like developer tools or whatever.
Mhm.
But like my thing is like, what if I like something like even more, right? And that's always an unknown and something that's made me a little uncomfortable is like am I really working on something like I'm the most passionate about? And I
Yes.
was curious, like, what are your thoughts on that sort of thing? Like finding your passion like at work and like also circling back to like college. Like you mentioned like you were part of Invention Corps and like all these amazing clubs. Like what helped you identify like what was your, like what helped you identify like your passions in college and beyond?
Yeah, there that's a great question, and there's kind of a lot to talk about here. But I will say, like, I definitely resonate when you say, like, is this is this what I'm passionate about? Is this like the best I'm gonna get? And I think that comes down to like almost a personality thing. Like I'm a pretty
Hmm.
anxious person, and specifically, I'm very much a perfectionist. And I think now that I'm out of college, it has kind of reared its head in almost an unexpected way, where the perfectionism is like manifesting in perfectionism about is my life the best life that it could be, even though like I
Mm,
know it's a good
interesting.
life, I like what I'm doing.
Right.
I'm like, but is there something better? Do you really like what you're doing right now? Like I know that it's okay, but like is it the best thing that you could be doing? And that's certainly something that I've been dealing with now that I'm working from home and there's nothing really else to do except for like sit and think about it, which is not a very like healthy place to be. I think if it were a normal situation, I would be like actually
Hmm.
doing stuff. I would be moving out. I would be, going out with friends and things. But I think something that I've figured out is just that there's always a possibility that maybe there's something better. But I think something that my CS classes taught me actually, like, you take CS 7 and you learn about probability. It's like there's a really good chance that this is the best thing, or if not, on the like normal curve, it's like 90th percentile, like I really like what I'm doing. I'm really happy. And I think you just kind of need to learn to understand that that could be enough, like take
Right.
a breath and be happy with what you have. And also understand that you have the privilege and power to investigate other things if you are passionate about them. I think this podcast
Exactly.
is a really great example of that. Like, you are a software engineer, you're going to be working on things that you're passionate about, but you completely have the freedom to explore other things like podcasting or arts. That's really important to
Mm,
me. Like I mentioned, I am an engineer, but I also have a lot of passions in the arts, like writing and like visual arts and things like that. And just understanding that just because I'm doing one thing, that doesn't mean that I'm barred from exploring other passions. Really kind of like helps put that in perspective. And then speaking to your question about how I kind of found that in college, um, I think it was, so if I were to give advice to anyone who is like starting out college or still in school, is to really lean into the idea that first of all, know that those questions will come up as soon as you graduate. You're going to be, I looked back like on my graduation day and I was like, did I do enough? Should I have like joined more clubs? Should I have like taken other classes? Because again, it's like what I talked about in high school. It's so easy and really comfortable to get into a line of thinking of here's my goal. I'm just gonna like single-mindedly get to my goal because that's the one thing I know is important for me to actually like accomplish.
right.
But really taking a step to like look around can lead you to new goals and new like really fulfilling things to do. So in college, I think one thing that really helped me was the clubs that I joined. And a big one, as you mentioned, is Invention Corps. So that was a really defining part of my college experience. So Invention Corps, the little spiel is that it's a multidisciplinary organization, really just with the purpose of taking on projects that accomplish some kind of good, whether it be on a macro scale or just a micro scale. Like, for example, we're working with like Phil's Coffee Shop this year, but we've also worked with midwives in Ghana to create things that will help them learn how to do their job better. So that was a really, really interesting and exciting club to be a part of, because it was kind of the first time I took a step to just find my own passions and stray away from what seemed to be kind of the general narrative for what a computer science major should be doing or what a software engineering major should be doing. Because here I was faced with a group of just every major under the sun. We had econ majors, we had architecture majors, we had CS majors, we had bio-E's, and we were all actually grouped together based on a passion rather than a goal. And there's a really subtle difference, I think, between a passion and being driven by a desire to like do good or something like that, versus being driven by an end goal. Like, I want to secure an internship, I want this to look good on my resume. And at Invention Corps, I kind of found that we were all united by that same just inner fire to, we were all doing different things, but at the end of the day, we want our things to help other people. So that was a really kind of grounding experience for me, because, you know, every Friday we would have these workshops, we would come in, we would learn these other skills, but we'd always be driven by this one kind of North Star of taking it back to empathizing with the people we're trying to help. How are we going to do things for others? And that, I think, helps me even now that I'm out of college. Every time I kind of have that worry of, am I really passionate about what I'm doing, or am I, you know, studying the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? I have that perspective to know if I feel like what I'm doing is helping someone else, then even if it's a big thing I'm doing or a small thing I'm doing, it's making a positive difference. And that's good enough for me, you know? So that
Right.
finding that perspective and community was really important to me in terms of building my identity in college.
Yeah, I think that's like really important to underscore is like there's no one right path to SWE. Like when I went into Berkeley, I was like, man, I need to get into like a coding club to get an
Yeah,
internship.
yeah,
And boy, was I wrong. That is not true at all. And
yeah.
like honestly, it's a time for exploration. And you mentioned like Invention Core was like super grounding for you and like it helped you find your identity. And I think that's what clubs are for. It's like finding
Mhm.
community, finding a great support system, and
Yeah.
like, you know, finding who you are. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna pad my resume or like this will get me a job. Like that's not the
Mhm.
I don't think that's the best way to approach it personally. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I definitely agree. And I think my interview and like getting jobs during this process, that was a weird way to phrase that, but I think my actual resume building, or when it actually came down to me getting jobs and interviewing for jobs, I don't even think it was like necessarily the resume boosters that are what got me the job or got my foot in the door. It
Right.
was more just my personality and me actually being passionate about the things that I was doing.
100%.
Because really at the end of the day, you can force yourself into like a SWE mold and like join all the clubs. But if you're,
Mhm.
and people, it's a stock thing that people say all the time. Like, if you're not passionate about it, your interview is going to be able to see it. But I
Right.
really think that's the case. Even if you're the best pretender in the world, there's a different motivation that you have when you love what you're doing and you really
Right.
want to get to a specific job because you love doing it. And I think that's maybe sometimes undervalued, or you think that you can kind of fake your way or like check off all the boxes. But I think you do yourself a disservice when you do that, because the truth is, like, you should be wanting to do things that you're really excited and passionate about too. And it's really scary to admit to yourself that you might not know what that is. And that's certainly a point that
Mhm.
I was in when I was first in college. And even now, sometimes it almost feels like you're admitting a failure in some way to say, I'm not sure what I'm doing. I'm not sure if what I'm doing is the right thing to do. But it's really liberating to tell yourself that that's okay. The world is open to you. Like, look at any single thing, and if you like it, try it. If you don't like it, we'll just like move on to the next thing. There's nothing wrong with not knowing where, if you're in the right place right now.
Yeah, that's something that is like a really great point. I never thought of it that way. I think for me, like personally, like when I was in Berkeley in my early years, when I was trying to declare, I felt like really like insecure about my decisions because I was like, is
Mhm.
this best for like getting
Yeah.
like an internship, or is this best for
Mhm.
like me landing a job? Is this good for me, like for my software, for me becoming a good software engineer? And what I realized at the end of the day is like, it's fine to feel indecisive because a lot of people are probably in the same boat as you. And, sometimes you just have to like stay focused on, I guess, like what you like learning. I think learning is the most
Yeah.
important part. um, I don't know if you had a similar experience, but like there are certain courses in CS where you feel kind of like lost. Like sometimes you're like, wow, this concept is so confusing. And you like go to office hours and you talk to your friends and it's still like very difficult. And I had like
Mhm.
a few of those experiences. And what helped me like, move past that was just understanding like it's okay sometimes to not know something. Like just try your best and like
Yeah.
as much help.
That's a
Yeah.
great point because I think that was um, a real kind of lesson that I needed to learn about like sophomore or junior year when the classes just started getting really, really hard.
Right.
Where the idea that I would need to go to office hours or need to get help from external sources was honestly kind of foreign to me. I think for a lot of Berkeley students, maybe you
Mhm.
come in and you're supposed to be like kind of like really good at whatever you're doing. That's how you got
Right.
into Berkeley. But then you start taking these really hard classes, and all of a sudden, like the truth is that you could either kill yourself and try to figure it out by yourself, or you can reach out to help. And learning how to reach out to help and knowing what to ask for is actually skills that I had to learn while I was taking these classes. And it definitely got to the point where like I remember I was taking CS 70, which is a discrete math and probability class, same for CS 170, which is an algorithms class. I had a schedule. I would on Friday, I had only one class. The rest of the time I spent in office hours just doing
Wow.
the homework. Um, and at first it felt like, why do I need so much help? Why do I need to spend hours in office hours? But the truth is that that's a way of learning too.
Right.
Something that I always think about is Hank Green said, he's like a big YouTube guy. Hank Green says that when everything that you know, you didn't know at some point. So
Right.
before you make fun of someone for not knowing something, you were in that exact place before someone taught it to you. And I definitely think that's important to learn when you're struggling in classes, and you will struggle in classes in Berkeley, just like seeing everyone who gets it so naturally, like they didn't understand it at 1.2 and then they figured it out. There's nothing inherently wrong with not understanding a concept or not being able to solve a problem.
Exactly. And I think that's especially important in a professional setting as well. I don't know if you can shed some light about like now as a full-time engineer, but like for me, like during internships, I would always feel so dumb at the beginning of the internship. I would just be like, wait, what does this mean? This mean? And like I realize like I think people have an expectation like you won't know a lot of things. And like once you become comfortable asking all these like questions that you have in mind, you're going to be like a lot more successful. And
Yeah, I
it's,
remember
it's
he
just
was really
hard
good
to
at
like
that,
just overcome
when
that
we were
as well.
interning together at Etsy. Like, I
Yeah.
definitely would like, no, like it was really great to like, because I had that same idea of like, I want to prove myself to them. I want to show
Right.
them that I'm a really good intern. So I don't want to like show any weakness by
Yeah.
asking questions. But yeah, you're exactly right. They totally, first of all, they expect you to just like know nothing. Like they
Yeah.
didn't, they hired you as an intern. And I think it's easy for you to always feel like you're like the most important person in the room, but it's like you were not important as an intern is like the reality of it. Um, so yeah, just like asking questions, and I think that's such a good like habit to fall into because again, it goes back to pretending. Like, why pretend to be anything that you're not? Like, if the
Right.
truth is that I don't understand how to do this thing, who is it helping for me to pretend that I know how to do it? It's not helping the company because they're getting probably subpar work from me because I don't know what I'm doing. It's not helping me because I'm not learning. It's not helping my team because now they think I can do something that I can't. So yeah,
100%.
ask questions. Just be honest about where you're at. You're
Exactly.
already hired, you know? Like
Yeah, you're already hired. Wait, one of my biggest worries in the beginning of Etsy was that I was gonna get fired. And I
yeah,
remember talking to other people. I was like, "Hey, man, like remember like the first thing like they give you this like GitHub
the
repo to like
boot
learn,
camp.
yeah, or
Yeah.
something, and then like you had to like do that, and I was struggling with it, and I would always message Kyle. I'll be like, "Hey,
Yeah, I remember we had like
can
a
you
group
help
chat where
me?"
like, did
Dude,
anyone get to
Kyle
this
was
part? Kyle was
Yeah,
really good
Kyle
at
was
it.
so ahead of everyone else, like the super code lab or whatever it's called.
Yeah, the
And I
super
was like,
code lab.
oh, dude, I was like, man, I'm gonna get fired in my first week. I can't finish
Yeah.
this quickly. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
just like after I think 2 weeks of that, I just got bored of it, and I was like, I asked my manager if I could stop, and she's like, "Yeah, it's probably fine."
yeah, it was like not that important. Like I don't think it was that important. It was just like fun to
I
like
think it was
refresh
like very
myself.
broad, so it didn't like
Yeah,
some parts were really helpful for each person, but like
exactly.
yeah, it wasn't like catered to your exact job, so not all of it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember there was like a database section in it, and only one person could like edit the database at a time. So we'd be like in line
I remember
during
that.
the super code lab.
And you're like, please let me in. That
That
was
was a
so
fun
funny.
time.
And I remember like my favorite moment at Etsy was, or not my favorite moment, like my favorite moments were like when we were hanging out as interns. And I think that's like
Yeah.
something that I found like very helpful throughout college is like having like a good group of friends and a good like study group. Like
Mhm,
I've done
mhm.
really poorly in classes where it's like just me and I don't know anyone else. And I don't know, like at Etsy, what made me like having like a really great group of friends and like
Mhm.
fellow interns who are also like doing stuff at Etsy was just super helpful, like in a weird way, like not weird way, like unexpectedly, like just having that support system was
Yeah,
just like
I
very helpful for
definitely
productivity.
agree with that. Yeah, I think to date, like that was just like the best summer of
Dude,
my
that was
life.
so
Like, it
fun.
was such a great time. Like, could probably do an entire podcast episode about like how much I loved that summer. But yeah, I think the people made a really huge difference. And I remember when we were doing end
Yeah.
of summer presentations, we were told to like put our favorite part of the experience. And I just put a bunch of
Yeah.
pictures of all of the
Oh my
crazy things that
gosh.
we did
Yeah.
that entire summer because it I think one big thing, unexpected thing that I learned from that summer was just the importance of having a good team around you. And I kind of
Mm,
already like I knew that
100%.
from like a friend's sense, where I really believe that you're the average of like the closest 5 people around you.
Yeah.
But it really showed me. I think internships a big purpose of internships is showing what like kind of what's your list of things that you need in a job that you take. And something that I didn't have on the list before Etsy, but I certainly had afterwards, was the importance of having a team that I really jived with. And it was the interns, all of us, and then also the actual team that I was on that I'd be working with every day. It is such a pleasant and good experience when you like the people that you're working with and you really feel like
100%.
you are part of a team working towards a common goal.
Yeah.
Really makes like the world of a difference where you're not just like a singular person doing your job and tapping out. It's like this community, this building is like a place that I really enjoy being.
Yeah. And like what stuck out to me in like Etsy was like as you mentioned, like the people and like enjoying working with the people. But was super cool was the people like were super interesting. Like one of my coworkers, she had her own band.
Yeah,
And then like one of my other coworkers was like really good at cooking. And like my other coworker just like traveled a lot. And I was like, wow, these people like are so cool and super interesting. While like to be honest, when I
yeah.
worked at certain other companies, like the software engineers, all they did was code all day and talk about algorithms. And it was fun, but like it wasn't as like enriching hearing about like all these different shared experiences. So that's something
Yeah,
that kind of
definitely.
opened my eyes.
Yeah, I think Etsy, like, my team at Adobe is kind of like that too. But I think speaking
Yeah.
to Etsy, like, one thing that they just did incredibly, especially on the engineering team, I think they really prioritized bringing in people of really varied backgrounds. Like, there were a lot of
100%.
engineers on the team that were not engineers by trade. Like, they had done
Yeah.
something else and then they did like a boot camp and now they are doing computer science. And really lent to like so many cool people to talk to. Like, I remember we had a hackathon and I was working with someone in I think UX research. And at the end of the summer, she like sent everyone an email. She's like, I'm leaving Etsy. I'm gonna pursue my dream of painting in France. And she just fully moved to France to
So
become a
cool.
painter. And I was like, people here are so cool. Like I think that's a big takeaway of my time at Etsy was just like everyone, and then maybe like New York in general, because that's the first time I'd really spent any time out of
True.
California, and I had really imagined this like beautiful place that New York would be. And like I think Etsy really like lived up to that. I was like, every single
For
person is
sure.
so cool. They're so chic. Like the best people at Etsy for sure.
Yeah, and we were set up like right next to the train station where we live. That was hype.
Yeah.
Like
Right out the
EHS.
door. Like I cannot like over emphasize how it was you walk out of the door and the subway station is right there.
And you could also go to Brooklyn Heights. And we lived in a bougie
We lived
area.
yeah, we lived in a really nice area. We lived like maybe a 5-minute walk from the Brooklyn Bridge. We were
Right.
like, Dumbo was right there. The piers were all right there. It was like
Dumbo. Yeah. We were so lucky.
what was it?
But
The promenade? Is that what it was called? Like when
yeah,
we
the
would walk.
promenade, like that looks over. Yeah. That
Incredible. It's like a
was
view of
right.
Manhattan. Wow. That
Yeah.
was just,
Honestly, that
and
was
we
so
could walk to
cool.
the office every day, which is like so few
That's
people
nice.
can do that, even in New York. Like we didn't have to take a train or anything. We would literally walk to our office and then walk back and then
We were
get
really
like the
spoiled as
$3 falafel
interns. Yeah.
sandwiches from the place next door.
Dude, and then also they had like those lunches, right? Which really built community as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I thought was really good. And something that I tried to like do for like my own club. You mentioned like you were like on the exec board for, Invention Corps, and like as a leader of like my own club now, I try to do that as well, like building community. And I
Mhm.
kind of steal like some of the themes that like
Yeah.
Etsy has.
Yeah. Yeah, I think bringing it back to what I was saying with Invention Core, I think Etsy
Hmm.
really kind of manifested that idea that I had been building through my like work with projects in Invention Core about doing mission-led work. And I think Etsy was a really
Right.
great
Yes.
company to do that in, where
Hmm.
I worked on really user-facing, like a really user-facing team. Like we literally worked on like the most traffic page. So we were always thinking about like, are people, there was so many like little metrics that you had to look at because it's like we want people to like use this like to buy things on Etsy.
Right.
And I think they did such a great job of like always, putting their motto in the forefront, like keep commerce human. All of the
Right.
changes, the big changes that we went through that summer, whether it be a new feature or a new initiative, it was so kind of rooted in the people that we were doing it for. And it was all really driven by this idea that we were helping small businesses and artists like show their work off. And that solidified the idea that work is really meaningful for me when I can be connected to the people I'm doing it for and really see that I'm making an impact in other people's lives. So it was really cool to kind of see that thread carry over from school to
Mm.
actually working in the real world.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing. Like when I was recruiting was like being client facing in a sense where you could like kind of see like how your user is using your like product. Like
Hmm.
at GitHub, like you can
Yeah,
literally see developers
use
like
GitHub every single day.
criticizing your
Man.
feature
Like
or like
could not live
complimenting
without
it.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, like people like give you very, very candid feedback,
Oh
which is
yeah, yeah,
great. I really like it. Like it's really helpful. So like, oh, like I'm impacting this one user this way. And it's
yeah,
similarly to like what we do at school, like building like what you did in Invention Corps is super cool. Like all the different clients you worked with, like you can see like your real impact. And that's
yeah.
what I like personally like gets me going, like for my
Definitely.
work.
I
Yeah.
think it's interesting that you bring up like the really candid user feedback because I think
Yeah.
that kind of displays maybe a flip side of feeling so user connected. Because I don't know how you feel about getting negative feedback. I think that's
Yeah.
we got a taste of that or at our summer at Etsy because that's the
Right.
summer they rolled out this kind of unpopular, um, I don't know, like
Free, is it free
the
shipping?
feature,
That one? Yeah.
unpopular like way of doing things, I guess, that a lot of
Yeah.
the sellers on Etsy were really upset about. So I don't know how you felt about seeing. I remember we used to send each other videos on
Yeah.
Facebook of like people just ripping it apart. And then even
Oh
though
my
we'd only
gosh, I
worked
remember
there for
that.
like a month, I remember being like, we're trying our best, like, and being like, I think as invested as you get for giving people a positive experience,
Right.
that you also feel it when people have a negative experience. I don't know if you felt similarly.
Yeah, I
Or
felt the same way. And I remember we were reconnecting with the other interns, and a Pranay shared a thread from a forum where they criticized like an article about the interns and specifically criticized me because they
Wait,
said
I don't
like,
even think I saw this.
okay, so basically this thread said like, hey, this kid said this. And I was just trying to be vulnerable in my interview. I was like, oh, in my first 2 weeks, I had to ask Stum for help. That's literally the
Oh,
premise of the first thing. And then they're like, oh, this type of engineer is low quality. Like, this is the stuff that is like, this is why
who
like
wrote this?
Etsy is
Like,
messed up. It was like a random anonymous user on Etsy.
okay, wait,
And a
send
Pranay
me,
showed
like,
me.
truly send me this, like, later.
Yeah,
I have
I will
not read
send it
this.
to you
I don't know
after.
if my heart
Like,
can take it, but like, I want to read it.
it's not that intense. Like, it was like 3 sentences,
Okay,
but it
okay,
hurt.
but still, yeah, no, that
I was
definitely.
upset. And I was like, Pranay, why do you show me that? I would like not know it if you showed me that. Like next time, don't show me that. But like,
Okay, so
dude, it
that's like
was
different because
crazy.
that's like a personal attack. Like, that's not even like attacking the work that you did. That's like
Yeah.
saying Ethan is a bad engineer,
Yeah. And I
which
was
like
like,
you how can you not
whoa.
be like hurt by that?
Yeah, I was like, whoa, not true,
Yeah,
but
first
I
of all,
guess
I'm a
whatever.
kick-ass engineer.
Yeah.
Second of all, go off of anonymous. Bet.
Yeah, next time use your real name. But anyways, yeah, I think like criticism is something that is hard to, take for
Mhm.
me, like in general. And I've learned like in my most recent internship experience, like I'm act like that's one of the things like I'm actively working on is like how to take constructive criticism.
Yeah.
Like, do you have any like advice on that realm? Like how I handle it is like it hurts a little bit, but I'm like I look at it, I'm like, okay, I got to work on that. That's a flaw.
Yeah,
Takes me a
yeah,
little
yeah.
bit.
Um, yeah, that's like uh, it's interesting because I first of all, I'm like definitely the same way where like I think I'm so attached to the work that I do, maybe like overly
Right.
attached to what I'm putting out into the world where it feels like an extension of me. So if someone comes for the work, then it feels like someone is like insulting me personally,
Right. Yeah.
which is obviously not the case. So I think the first thing to do is like really think about maybe the unhealthy attachments you have to certain things. So
Hmm.
knowing I am not my work, I'm not the work that I produce. I'm just someone who is doing my best to create this piece of work, and it's a work in progress. I'm going to keep like bettering myself. And then like I think we all know that it shouldn't hurt. It's a learning experience. Like you just gotta learn from it and move on. But like you can't help but when you get criticism, at least I can't. Like I think it's going to sting, and I think you just had to keep telling yourself that first of all, the sting is not like a productive emotion. Is something that I try to like tell myself, especially when it comes to work. Really having that distinction between there's a part of me that is an employee for this company, and there's the other part of me that's just my own person. And this employee has gotten a piece of feedback. Now you can agree with that piece of feedback or you can disagree. If you agree, that means that you need to improve yourself. And if you
Hmm.
disagree, you can either bring it up if you think that's important, or you can put it into context for yourself and know that you can either improve, you can change the way you do things later. But I think particularly when it comes to constructive criticism on the work, I think if you can kind of take yourself, like your real personal feelings out of the situation and just understand that everyone wants to do a better job for the product, it kind of helps things feel less personal. But
Yeah.
it's
I
hard.
definitely agree with that. Like taking the feelings out of it is hard. And I think like having those difficult conversations and, being honest go hand in hand. Like people will give you honest feedback and sometimes you're confused by it. And like the best way that I approach that, like sometimes when I'm like, hey, like I don't understand where this is coming from, I usually like have a conversation with that person. And
Yeah.
that like honestly gives a lot of information because over Slack, especially like when it's maybe remote, like there's not as much like feeling involved. So it doesn't sound as friendly. So it's really
Mhm,
important
mhm.
to, assume the best intentions as like our handbook said back in the day.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, just like assume that the person that's saying it has good intentions and then just follow up with them and say like, hey, like, what do you mean by that? And I think that's something I want to add on is like, sometimes it's important to follow up and like not try to like take it the wrong way and try to
Yeah, yeah.
clarify it as
That's a
soon as
really good
possible.
point to bring up during like this really weird kind of work from home
Yeah.
situation we're all in.
Hmm.
And I think you can probably speak to it better than I can because I just started like work, so I didn't necessarily need like end of internship check-ins or anything. Like it wasn't as
Right.
important for people to be like consistently giving me feedback. Um, but yeah, I can totally see that must have been a big challenge for you to like because in an internship they have to give you feedback. There's no not giving you feedback, but now you have to do it through like a Slack message or like even a
Yeah.
Zoom can feel impersonal, but it's not like they can just like they have to tell you these things. So it's
Right.
I guess it's important to like understand and remember that no one is a perfect worker. Like if you were a perfect worker, you wouldn't be like an intern right now. You'd be like running the company.
Right. Yeah. We all have flaws, and it's always helpful to, learn from, all these types of. I like to frame it as like feedback. Like, I don't know if
Mhm. Yeah.
criticism sometimes like has a negative connotation, but like
Yeah,
it's definitely the
that's a really
feedback
good
that's
point.
important.
Yeah, because like
Yeah.
maybe like honestly in a professional environment, I don't know if anyone should be like criticizing you because I think that
Yeah.
adds a layer of like judgment of like, hey, you shouldn't do it this way. I think
Mhm.
feedback's a good way to think about it where it's like, hey, like maybe this is like a learning opportunity for you, or this is like a way that you could do things a little better. Um,
Right. Definitely. And I think like something that ties in with like criticism or feedback is the notion of rejection.
Mhm.
And that's something that's also really hard to take, like, especially in early on in like college where you're just like applying to a bunch of things, like whether it's clubs, like internships, research positions. And like at Berkeley, at least for me, I was rejected by like most of those organizations.
Mhm.
And that was really frustrating. Like, what tips do you have for like college students for, facing or overcoming rejection? Like do you have any like tips for overcoming that little hurdle early on in your career?
Yeah. Um, so I think when it comes to rejection, it goes back to kind of what I was saying about exploring in college and not pretending to be something that you're not.
Mhm.
Because I don't know, maybe it's a naive idea, but I really do feel like if you're as clear-minded as you could possibly be about who you are and what you want and what you're passionate about, that will lead you to find the right opportunities. And I really feel like that's kind of how my life has like turned out, where like I didn't even know like how do you apply to internships? When do you start applying to internships? I really didn't know much about that. I didn't even go to career fairs until like my senior year was like the
Yeah.
first career fair that I went to. The way I got Etsy was I was at a hackathon for fun, and I literally
Same.
I saw their table. I don't know if you remember, the table was like in the corner of like the
Hal hacks,
second
right?
floor or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Callus,
I
yeah.
saw them and I literally said to my partner who was there with me, I really like those notebooks and pens. They're really pretty and I want one. So I'm gonna go over there and talk to her. Like that's who I am as a person. Like aesthetics really like matter to me. I loved Etsy's aesthetics. So that's why I went to the
So
table.
good.
And I just had a great conversation with Sarah, who was there, who was our recruiter.
That's so
And that
sweet.
led me to like I was really passionate about like getting to New York. Like I had this idea about what that would be like. And that is what kind of propelled me to where I got. And same thing, I think when I got Adobe, it was another like serendipitous moment that I can get into later if you're interested. But I really felt like not doing it for the job necessarily, but doing it
Yeah.
like I like talking to these people. Like my interests have led me here. That's what opened the doors really easily. Like I don't mean to like be bragging. That's not bragging. That's just saying that like when I knew who I was and what I wanted, that led me
100%.
to things that I was naturally good at and that were
Right.
naturally fit for me because I wasn't pretending
Awesome.
to be anything else. So I think when it
Yeah.
comes to rejection, like the times where I've been rejected from like a company or a club, I think in hindsight, I could the truth is that I didn't fit with those people, better or for worse. Like you can take that as a critique of
Right.
yourself and you can beat yourself down of like, why weren't you what they needed? Why weren't you smart enough? Why couldn't you solve those problems fast enough? But like you can work really hard on yourself and like definitely work really hard on yourself to get where you want to go. And even if that
Mhm.
means working hard enough until you get to the point where that company that or club that rejected you finally accepts you, like that's totally fine. But understanding that it wasn't necessarily a random happenstance. It wasn't a judgment of your character. It just the facts are the facts, and the facts are that you as a person, or not even a person, the work that you produce, or like the person that you are, or the way that you mesh, did not match what you're trying to like link up with. So either work harder if that's what you know you want to do, then identify what the broken link was, or really take a step back and think about why did I get rejected? Is it because I'm just not as passionate about this as they are? Am I not the right like do if it's a club, like is my personality just like not the kind of personality that they're looking for? If they're like a social club, like am I just not getting along with them? Because if you're not getting along with them, then you shouldn't
Right.
be in that club already. So it's really, I think, taking a very like analytical approach to
Mhm.
your feelings is kind of what helps me to not get bogged down by like just feeling that I'm just not good enough. It's like, no,
Yeah.
something is off. Figure out what was not good enough and figure out if you want to fix it or if it was a
100%.
valid mismatch.
Right. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Like using that like analytic framework. I remember how I got my Etsy internship was like literally very similar to your
Yeah.
experience. Like I was at Cal Hacks, second floor. I saw
We must have
Sarah
just
and
like
I was,
walked past each other, which is
yeah, and
crazy
that
that
would be
me and
crazy,
Alvaro
right?
talk about
Yeah.
Etsy, where it's like we all went to the same school, but we just never
We
we
never
didn't know each
interact with
other
each
until we
other.
were there.
And she had like a stack of those like really sick notebooks. I was
Notebooks,
like,
right? Yeah, I
I
still
was
have
like
mine.
moleskin. I was like, I mean, that's good stuff. So I went in, I grabbed it, and I was like, okay, I gotta, I should talk to them. I'm not just
Yeah,
gonna
you're
grab
here,
and
you're
leave,
taking
right?
your stuff. Might as
Yeah.
well.
I talked with Sarah, had a really great conversation. I was like, wow, this is a really cool company. And like, I've heard of Etsy, but I haven't really used it. But like my mom used it and some of my other friends used it. So I was like, okay, it's probably a cool company. I checked it out. So I was like, New York. And I was like, hold up. That's super cool
Gotta
too.
go.
And then yeah, I looked at the description and then I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I'm interested. I applied, did a coding challenge, which was all like kind of lucky because I only got that because I talked to Sarah. And I think
Mhm.
that's like something I'll get into later. But like you have to put yourself into positions where you can be like lucky in a sense sometimes.
True. Yeah, yeah.
And yeah. And like when I finished it, I did my interview at Etsy, like it was amazing. And that was all kind of by luck and by chance. But the reason why I got there was because like I went to this hackathon and I liked building things. Like that
Hmm.
was the first step, right? So
Yeah.
like putting
No,
yourself in those
exactly.
like opportunities that you're passionate about, right? Like building things at hackathons or like doing research or whatever, you'll find these really amazing opportunities like hidden in plain sight.
Yes, exactly.
So
And
it's
I think
important to do those things. Yeah.
sometimes when you say stuff like that, it seems like, oh, they're just saying like follow your dream, follow your passions, like don't work hard. But I think it's
Yeah.
really the point that I'm getting at is that be the best at what you're passionate about. Like I think it's so important to work really hard and to push yourself. And I think Berkeley does a great
Mhm.
job of forcing you to do that.
Yeah.
But apply that drive and work ethic in something that you want to succeed at,
Right.
And I think that's when you'll really see things happen for yourself because then it's the perfect combination of you working hard. Because Ethan, I don't think it was luck. Like you worked hard to get where you were. Like
Yeah.
I remember like you were working
Yeah.
at Etsy and you I'm sure you like studied for your coding interviews and everything like that because
Yeah.
that's something that you wanted. But the way that we got there was aided by being really good fits for Etsy, for example. Like I wouldn't have
Right.
like talked to Sarah or been so excited about the company if I wasn't really like I genuinely loved every aspect of working at Etsy. Like the office was so beautiful
Same.
and like
Love
that might
it.
not matter to a lot of people, but for me, like I would see those like specific design details and I thought it was amazing. Like my resume, whenever a lot of recruiters see it, they say, "Oh, this is like a design resume." Like I can tell that you're a designer because that's something I'm really passionate about is design and aesthetics. And that was the perfect fit for a company like Etsy where Sarah saw my resume and she's like, "This is really pretty." And it matched because I was just being
Exactly.
myself. And I was like, I know it doesn't look like a traditional CS resume, but it's pretty. I like the way it looks. Like, this is who you're going to be getting. So, like, here you go. Here's my resume. So,
Yeah,
yeah, be
exactly.
the best at something, but make it something worth being the best at.
100%. And you mentioned you want to like we should talk about. I thought it was like a really great story, like the Adobe, like how you like got your foot in the door for Adobe. Could you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, yeah. So like I mentioned, I did not like seriously go to a career fair until senior year hunting for full-time jobs. Um, and so that was a crazy experience. And I guess people had been doing that for years, but I was like, okay, I should probably like go to one of these and like get myself a job. So I remember I showed up there 30 minutes before it was supposed to start, and there was already a line like across the building. So people were like fully lined up 30 minutes before, and I was like, okay, this is pretty serious. So I lined up and I was there for maybe like 2 hours, and like the lines were really long. And it was just like not a fun time because I don't know. I don't love the performative aspect of career fairs and things like that, where you're like, sometimes it feels like you're like selling yourself. It feels like they're not even listening a lot of the times. Like I remember I was in the Amazon line for so long and then I got there and they were like, oh, we're going paperless this year. So like apply at this link. And I was like, what? And what's the point? And I was like, I should have known better than to stand in an Amazon line after working at Etsy.
SMH.
Didn't even apply. So yeah, I was just like walking around, wasn't a super great time. I remember I actually had like another interview like right after that. So I had gone outside to like to give that interview like on the phone because it was just like a feeler call. And then once that ended, I had like maybe 10 minutes to get to class, kind of on the other side of campus. But I was like, I might as well like walk through the fair, just like see if I can slip in my resume to anyone. Um, and then like head to class. So I was walking through and the Adobe line was there and there's like a lady who seemed to not be doing anything. And I was like, oh, cool, like Adobe's cool. Like again, like their water bottles look really nice. Like someone had told me in a different line, they're like, did you go to the Adobe table? Like they have really cool merch. I was like, no, I should definitely check that out. So there was like a lady just standing there, and I was like, oh, this is great. I should like give her my resume. So I was like, hey. And she said hi. And she's like, did you come from the line? And then she pointed behind me. And I somehow missed like the long line for that table. And I was like, no, I didn't see that. I'm so sorry. Um, I gotta go though. Like I wish I could
Right.
talk, but like sorry about that. I'm just gonna go. And she's like, oh well, like you can give me your resume, like it's no big deal. And I was like, cool. Then I gave my resume, and like literally that like 30-second encounter, I guess, was good enough that I got an email later asking if I wanted like to
So
schedule
awesome.
an on-campus interview. And that's just like where it started. And I think that kind of is indicative of like my general approach was like maybe it's a naive approach to job search, because I know people who are like really intense about like having their spreadsheets and like, getting in the time to talk with people. But even when I was at that career fair, I would honestly like go to the tables with like the least amount of people, and the people who seemed like they just wanted to have a conversation with me. Like I remember I came back with like the randomest companies, and I was telling my friends or like later I was like, oh, I have like a Schlumberger interview. Like, do you know who they are? I don't know. There's no one at the
Yeah.
table. So like I like went. But like that's kind of the same kind of thing that happened with like the Adobe table. And then even at my interview, I remember I was asked like I think just a question about like a struggle at work, like one of those like how did you
Mhm.
overcome it? And I remember I told like a real story that had somewhat recently happened to me. And
Mhm.
I ended it with like, I don't know, I haven't told that story before. Like I don't know if it's like the right kind of interview story. And he was like, no, like that was
Yeah.
like, thank you for sharing that. Like I don't know, like he was kind of caught in a moment of like real human vulnerability as well. And I think that was kind of
Mm.
indicative of how like the whole interview process went for me, where it wasn't like and I think Adobe did a great job of this in general. Like I can really tell the way that they interview was meant for like to hire a person, not a skill set. And yeah, it just really felt like he in those little moments of like catching someone unaware or catching someone in like a moment of like this is my real story, like I'm not trying to like sell anything, like this just happened to me, like
Right.
here you go. Kind of broke down those barriers to see each other as like people who could work together rather than like a resume or like a list of things that would look good on a list of things that Adobe can do.
Yeah, I had a similar experience while interviewing at GitHub, and GitHub is has like an interesting interview experience where they have a diversity and inclusivity
Oh
interview
yeah,
for interns as well.
like a
And they were
an
like
interview that's for like DNI.
DNI, and they just want to hear about like what your experiences are like and like what are your thoughts about diversity in general, which is scary,
Cool.
right? As someone with
Yeah.
like, you know, like who doesn't have that much experience in that area, right? So I was just like, hey, like I grew up in a pretty great environment, to be honest, and I was just like
Hmm.
very honest about it. I just told them about like what I experienced through and like some of my core beliefs. And I just shared like the things that I learned like while teaching. And I was like, I don't know if this is good enough. I like don't know all the theory behind this, but yeah, this is all like I don't know what to say in this interview, and this is just how I feel about this
Yeah.
topic. And they really liked it. And the recruiter, we had like one of the best conversations about like education out of all the
Hmm.
things we could talk about.
Yeah, see,
And
it
I don't
works.
know, it just reminded me of that, and just like it's so important to sometimes you don't have to memorize things for an interview. While that could be helpful for certain companies, it's important to just be yourself, as cliche
Yeah,
says.
as it sounds so cheesy, but I really do think that's the most helpful thing that you can do to yourself, to do for yourself. And I think it has always played off really well. And the way I kind of learned to do this was my freshman year. I was trying to interview for things, but like as a freshman, you have no experience, both
Right.
interviewing and like experience to do a job that you might apply for.
Yeah.
But I remember I put so much pressure on myself to be this like perfect like candidate and show them how like experienced I was. So I had a call and I like super flopped a question because I didn't even know what to say, and I just started like talking, hoping that I would find the answer while I was speaking. And I was telling my roommate about it, and she was just like, "Oh yeah, like if I get a question and I don't know the answer, like I just say like, oh, it's kind of hard. Like, can I think about it for a second?" At the time, I was so taken aback. I was like, "What do you mean? Like showing vulnerability and weakness in an interview? Like, no." But that really stuck to me because that idea that you can just be yourself and tell the truth when a question is
Mhm.
hard, I think is sometimes something that you just don't do, and you end up making a lot of mistakes because you like force yourself into just starting to talk
Mhm.
or you get frozen in the moment because you're trying to be this one person, but you're like actually this other person at the
Right.
same time. You just do yourself a disservice, you know? So I've
Yeah.
ever since freshman year, I always think about that. So when I get a hard problem, I always say, that's kind of difficult. Let me think about it. And the
Right.
interviewers always are like, yeah, for sure. This is a hard question. That's why we ask it.
Yeah.
Like, go ahead and think about it. Like
Yeah.
they're not, how many people are going to be able to solve that and or say the right answer like immediately? And if you
Exactly.
find one, like good job, you should hire them. But I need some time to think, and I think you should want to hire someone who will think critically about the questions that you ask them.
Yeah, and like building on that, like during the interview process, it's okay to like not get the answer like in a quick time. Like some of the best interviews I've done were when I struggled a lot and I was just exploring like five different solutions before I got to the optimal solution. And that's
Yeah.
actually sometimes better than like maybe getting the optimal solution directly because they can see like how you communicate, how you
Mhm.
problem solve, how your processing works. And I remember when I interviewed at Etsy, I didn't really know that much about data structures because I only took like 6-1A. But like they asked me a data structures question, and I was like, I don't really know this, but this is how I would design it if I made a data structure.
Mhm. Cool.
That was something that was
Yeah.
super cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to wrap this all up and like say thank you so much to Neha for taking time out of her day to speak with me and shed some light on her experiences and any advice she had for like software engineering and college and in general. And yeah, do you have anything to plug before we head off?
Not a lot going on right now. You can follow me on Instagram at neha.dabke. And that's about it. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, my family got a puppy recently, and I'm working on building his Instagram following, but don't have a lot going on that front yet. But I'll let you know.
Ooh, exciting. Well, yeah, thank you again and
Yeah,
take
thanks, Intern.
care.
This was a really fun time.
Sweet.